So mass media basically is used to communicate to a larger audience, whereas traditional media, you are communicating with your group. If it's a small village, then you are communicating among your village community. So this is very small media, and you can also say that it is a local media, not your large scale mass media channels like newspapers, television, or radio, where you are using the mass media to communicate to a larger audience. Now, what includes basically your folk dances, your tribal dances, then you have plays, dramas, and various folk songs are also part of traditional media or the folk media. So, folk media, traditional media basically means the same. And as I told you, the last point is basically that the folk media originated because people wanted to communicate among themselves. Now, in India, folk media is a composite act where you have all different elements. You have music, you have drama happening on the screen, you have some songs being played in the drama. So it's a combination of all different elements, right? From music, you have music. For example, Ram Leela is the best example. You have music being played, and then you have dance in that. You have different characters, and then obviously costumes because it's a play. So it is a composite art form where different elements come together. And yes, it observes the ceremonials, rituals, beliefs, and the values of the society or the social system present right there. And the best examples for folk media and traditional media are Burakathas, Ogukathas, Jatra, then puppetry. Puppetry is very famous in UP and in North. Then you have Natak. Nautanki is very famous in North as well. Tamasha is famous. Yakshagana, highly religious form. And then you have Bhavai, Ramlila, Raslila, and street theaters. Now, street theaters in India was also used to propagate the communication, development communication messages of the government. Here, you might have seen during the pulse polio and the HIV/AIDS campaign, where people were also performing on the roads to give messages regarding HIV/AIDS and then the polio. So these are the various traditional folk forms which are very famous in India, and since this is a very ancient form, and since it is grown with the people of that particular community, the folk media is very close to the hearts of the people. Can you all switch off your mics? Someone has kept it on again. Yeah. Now, folk media or traditional media, basically, it is very direct. And since it is of that particular community, it includes their language, obviously, and then it will have their dialect as well. And people, if think of the media as interaction between the sender and the receivers. Now, the sender is from the group. He is speaking your own language. For example, he is enacting one act play where he is enacting a play where he is the main character, and he is speaking in the dialect of the community or their language. So people easily connect with that person because he is part of that particular community. And apart from that, people can also trust him because he is part of our community. Now, what happens in the mass medium, people might not trust the source because he is not part of your community, and there might be some kind of discord within. If someone is part of your particular community, obviously you will trust him, and that's what happens in traditional media. And people, as I told you, also connect with the messages of the traditional media because it is connecting with them at a personal level. Same culture, same tradition, same customs, and the same dialect and language. Both the sender and the receiver is speaking. And traditional folk form performances are uniformly popular. Now, this is very popular among the community. It does not require all of them to be part, I mean, all of them to be of the same educational levels. And then it does not care that whether you are at a different level in the society or financially you are different. It does not bother, because once the media is part of the community, or it has grown from the community, everyone can connect with that media, irrespective of the social, educational, financial background of the audience. Here what I'm talking about is the audience, not the source. Because uh, if you see in a society, every society is stratified in terms of whatever it is. If it's caste, then if it's educational background, financially also society is stratified between the high class, middle class, and the lower class people. But here what happens is that with the help of folk media, you can connect with all the people in the society. Now, folk media is something which is also heavily used to propagate development messages in India, because one, the media is very close, and majority of the population in India lives still in the villages, and that's why you have folk media being used by the government to connect with the rural audiences. Now look. Let's look at the characteristics of folk media or the traditional media. Now, folk media has sustained the onslaught of time. Now, what happens is that once media is popular, the other media's popularity may go down. So a similar thing is happening right now when the digital media is rising in United States, where the newspaper is going down, and most of the newspapers now have converted into the digital form, because digital media now is more uh, uh, popular among the people, because now everything is on your mobile phones. Every news item you get alerts on your phone. And the audience for newspapers in United States is shrinking, whereas in India the trend has not picked up, because you have a larger audience in India which still reads newspapers. But United States, many newspapers are packing up and they are moving on to the digital media. But when it comes to the folk media, since people are connected with it, it is surviving despite innovation in the media, because people continuously use this media to communicate among themselves. And apart from that, they have sustained by changing folk media. Uh, there are a few religious forms which do not allow other messages to be included in the folk media performances, but some folk forms allow other kinds of messages to be included in the folk performances. And because of this kind of feature, it has survived or sustained during the changing times. Even if it's the rise of the digital media, folk media is still popular in the rural audiences. Now, in folk media, the best example you can take is the street plays. Now, everyone is a participant in the performance, and no one is an audience. Now, why do I say this? Because when you are observing a street play, also, you might connect with it, and the host or the person who is performing may also use your inputs during the performance, and that's why you can say that every any person is not is always a participant in the performances and never an audience, because he is continuously engaged with the performances. And because of this, there is a direct feedback which goes to the source or the performer who is giving out his or her messages. And then when he gets the direct feedback, he may change his performance or take inputs from the person or the audience which he is interacting with, because this form is very flexible. Unlike the mass media, what happens in mass media is that if it's a newspaper, the source is very far away from you. He is in the news organization where the newspapers are produced, and the audience is at the local level, and feedback is not immediate. to the newspaper organization. Whereas when it comes to folk media, because it is being performed in front of you, basically the feedback is immediate, and that is where the source might take your inputs and change the performances or make modifications in the performances so that he incorporates his the audience's messages. And as I told you, it is spontaneous and flexible. So any folk media performance, except few religious forms which do not allow modification in the religious content, they are all flexible in the sense that if you want to include some other kinds of messages, or if you want to include some developmental messages, right now corona pandemic is on, so if you are giving some positive messages in that, these forms may incorporate it. And apart from that, as I told you, during the performances also, the performances can be changed because the performers are right in front of you, unlike the mass media where there is a big distance between the sender and the audience or the receiver, because they are very far from each other. And apart from that, it is cost effective. Now, folk media, the cost is less because it is not a large grand scale kind of media where you need to have a studio to produce your programs. Then you need to have a special processing unit to process the entire footage. Or if it's a newspaper organization, you don't need to have the news bureau or the printing presses to print the newspaper. This is a very cost effective way of communicating, because you have your village troops, you have theater performers already in the community, you have folk singers. So these people basically, they don't the cost involving them is very less. And I think investment is also one time over there, where they have to invest basically in their attires and costumes. Only thing is that you are just including a special kind of message. If you want any development messages to be given to the public, you are just including such kind of message in the already existing folk media or the traditional media, which is already there with the people. You are just spending some time creating few messages so that you can deliver with the troupe or the group or the performers which are already present at the crowd. And because it is cost effective, you can repeat the same program. So a band of a troupe of performers may perform one particular the same act in one village, and then they can move to some other village. So it has this enhanced repeatability where you can perform the same act or same songs or any kind of performances again and again. So this media is very cost effective, and it is very easy to repeat, unlike the mass media where a lot of investment is required when it comes to producing content. And apart from that, it has immediate feedback and increased attentiveness. Now, since the source and the receiver is present at the same place at the same time, there is immediate feedback which you are getting right from the audience. Now, for a communication process to be successful, you should know that whether the audience is actually understanding or receiving or assimilating your messages, or this can be only possible only when you get a proper feedback from the audience. Now, what happens in the large or the mainstream media is that, for example, let's take television news. Now, television news is produced in a studio. Now, this studio-based content basically does not allow for that much feedback, because the audience is somewhere away from the television studio. The only feedback which they allow is voice in programs where the opinions or the questions or the perspective of the audience or the viewers present at the ground is given through the studio broadcast. That is one way which you take feedback from the audience, where a reporter is present at the ground, and then he or she is giving the opinions of the people, where people can put their questions to the experts in the news programs. So this is how feedback is done in television. And apart from that, if it's a news program where there is a direct broadcast, you may not see that there is an immediate feedback. Here, the main point you should understand is that the source and the receiver are very far away from each other. Whereas when it comes to folk media or traditional media, take a small kind of street play only, where you have the source and the receiver present at the same time and at the same place. So if a receiver or the audience has some feedback to be given, they can immediately give the feedback to you because you are present right there performing in front of them. So this folk media, the best feature which it allows is its immediate feedback process. And apart from that, it increases attentivity. Now attentiveness, why? Because since the performers are from your community, you know that language, you know that dialect, you know the play which they are performing, you know that the source is also from your community, so same culture, same tradition. So this allows more interest, or it allows more attentiveness among the audience who are present over there. So obviously, if someone you know is performing on the in the traditional media or on the stage, you basically connect with that person because you know that person, because he's your person from your community. So apart from that, it is performed in a common language, as I told you. And apart from that, it is direct and personal. So direct in the sense the audience is connecting with the messages which the source is giving. And they are also connecting with them personally because he or she is from the same community. Now, what are the advantages of the folk media? Basically, it is intimate with the masses in the sense that the people directly are connecting with the folk media, and this allows better feedback. And basically, a better communication process happens when you use the folk media, because feedback is very important for a successful communication process. And apart from that, it is physically very close to the people. As I told you, it is very close to the people because the performances are happening right in front of you. And apart from that, these are personal media. So personal media in the sense the community knows that this media has come out from them, their ancestors have used the same media. So this is very personal to them because it is from their community itself, and it allows scope for repeat performances. Apart from that, regional and local level variations are also possible in the sense that you can change the content of the media based on the changes in the community as well. And the most important thing is that there is a scope for using body language or non-verbal language. Now, body language is basically when you are using gestures or your body movements to communicate with the audience. And non-verbal is also basically apart from the words which you are speaking, everything comes under your non-verbal. Whether it's a wink of an eye, or whether it's simply waving hi to your friends, or using any kind of body language or your body to communicate with the audience. So folk media allows this scope for using the body language and all the non-verbal communication which a human being does. And then you have the use of local languages and costumes. Basically, when the traditional media and folk media are locally born with the community, and hence it uses the local language of that particular community. And obviously the costumes, for example, if it's a tribal dance performances or tribal culture, obviously they use the costumes which they have, they use all kinds of things which are close to them. Yeah. Now, folk media, can you switch off your mic? Hello. Okay. Now let's understand first what is development communication. Now, in simplest term, the term development is any change which improves the lives of the people. The simplest definition that is that development is any change in the lives of the people which improves their standard of living. Now, in India, in the past few years, we have used development also in the elections. And now, any activity which tries to improve the lives of the people, which is trying to change the attitudes and the behavior of the people, is is development. And this is a positive activity. Nothing associated with the development is negative. You are just trying to bring about a positive change in the community or in the larger society as well. Now, folk media and development communication, basically, communication used to promote development is development communication. So, any communication which gives the messages of development is development communication. Now, folk media has a maximum potential for change in the society because, unlike the mass media, the folk media is basically very close to the people, and hence it has a maximum potential for change in the society. In the sense, mass media, since it's very far away from the people at the ground, does not bring about a maximum change, because what happens here is that, as I told you, the source is from is not from your community, and there is a trust deficit between the source and the center and the audience. But when it comes to folk media, since your people are communicating with yourself, accepting messages which try to bring change in the community becomes easy, and that is the function of development communication. You are trying to bring about some kind of positive change in the community. Now, change is very difficult because people are resistant to change, especially when it comes to the rural community, because they are used to their way of life, and bringing about change in their beliefs and value system is very difficult. And that is where you can use the folk media to bring about these changes. Now, that is the role of a development communicator. So basically, when you are in the media, or there is something called extension, where people go about and give the messages from of the development to the people. So these people are the development communicators. They are trying to influence the beliefs and the values of the local social system, and that is where folk media is the best media to create changes in the rural audience. Because first of all, in India there are some villages which do not have access to the mass media, and there are still many communities which are very behind or away from the mainstream society, where they like to live according to their past cultures and traditions. So they are not exposed basically to the modern mass media, and hence to reach out to these communities, you can use the folk media and bring about changes in those communities. Now, as I told you, some folk forms. Just a minute. Okay. So, as I told you, some folk forms can adapt to the situation and incorporate the development messages. So, except few religious forms which are highly religious, which talk about the stories of the gods and the goddesses. So these religious forms do not allow any flexibility, because the story is based on scriptures which are already written, and hence because of that you cannot bring in your messages into that religious plays or performances, because it is based on traditional scriptures which have existed in the community for a long time. For example, any religious form, if it's a story of a goddess, basically you cannot change the story, because that is the personal story of a goddess. So in those kind of folk forms, you cannot incorporate the other kind of messages. Whereas if it's something like puppetry where puppets are performing, obviously you can change the story because it is not that heavily linked to a particular religious form. And puppets, obviously the stories can be changed. Then if it's a street play also, you can write your own story and perform the street play. So this kind of flexibility exists in almost most of the folk forms. So it is very easy to adapt to the situation and incorporate the other development messages. So it can be anything. For example, puppetry was used in family planning. So one of the characters can be a male, and then you can have a female, and then how to reduce the children in the family can be the message, or how to plan your family is the best example, where a character can explain the message, and then so this is how you can incorporate a particular message. So in family planning, puppetry was used during those days, where any one character, I mean, if two husband and wife is interacting, and then some other character might come, the elder in the family, and say that so you need to have less number of children and all those kinds of things. So this is how you can incorporate other messages into the folk forms which are already present. And apart from that, folk media is effective in communication, in development communication, because as I told you, it does not have this distant status like the mass media, where the sender and the receiver are very far away from each other. The best example, as I told you, newspaper or television you can take, and where the sender and the receiver are sitting somewhere else. So the sender might be producing news from the newsrooms, and the receivers are at the ground. They might watch the television program or read the newspaper. So basically, there is a physical distance between the source and the receiver of the messages. Whereas in folk media, there is no such kind of distance status involved, because both the sender and the receiver are at the same place and at the same time. So both are at the same ground where the performance is taking place. And apart from that, rural audiences are very close to the folk media because it is their media. And the best part of folk media is that you can use it to mobilize people in any form of activity or any development project which is being conducted in that community. For example, you are building a small dam in your village. So with through the folk media form, you can tell them, or if it's a small kind of play which has existed in your community, you can use that play to give the messages basically on how this dam will change the community as well, how the irrigation facility in the village can be improved with the help of this dam. So you are giving a positive message, a development message to the people, because with the help of folk media. And this also allows participation of the people, not in the both in the performance as well as the local activity which you are doing, where you can use the manpower right from the community as well. And apart from that, while preparing content also, preparing and performing that same content, you can use the participation of the people uh, right from the community, so that you can conduct that particular development activity. And here, because the feedback is instant, you also know the reactions of the audience at the same level, because some may accept whatever you are doing, and some may not. So you have to convince the people. For example, the same dam example. So all of them might not be uh, accepting that particular change, because there might be some people who don't like changes, and this is where your role comes in, where you have to use the folk media form and convince people that so and so thing will bring a change and improve the lives of our people. Yeah. As I told you, folk media can make people accept changes more faster than mass media because there is a trust among the people, and people basically trust that source because it is from their community as well. And earlier, the entire communication process, when it comes to giving development messages, failed because people did not trust the people in the mass media. Someone is coming and telling us to do something. Why should we trust him? Because there are self-interest involved in development also, where the source might benefit with the activity which he is conducting, and he or she may not care about the local public because there are self-interest involved in development also, where the source wants to do something because he sees some personal gain or some personal benefit out of it. And that is where the rural audience may not trust him because firstly he is not from our community, and then why should we trust him because there might be his self-interest involved in this particular project. And that is where there is a trust deficit between the source in the mass media and the audiences which are present in the ground. And folk media, and that is where the mass media failed in giving out these messages to the people because first of all, people did not trust them. And if you are including folk media into the development process, people will obviously trust this person because he's from your community. And and apart from that, folk media is basically involves low cost. One of the advantages, as I told you before, is that folk media involves less cost, and here the language is not a barrier because the source and the receiver are of the same language. Now, in the early stages of India's independence, the the communication happens to be in one or unilateral direction, where the government communicates with the people that these are our development programs and policies. We are going to conduct these. So this is a one-way kind of thing which is happening right from the top, where the source is someone who is very powerful and who is very far away from the audiences, whereas uh, the people are at the bottom. So this is a kind of top-down approach of communication, a very linear approach, where from the highest source is at the top and the receivers are at the bottom. So you can take villagers to be someone who are at the bottom. And basically, India was earlier agrarian society, and so that's where communication happens from the top to bottom. And earlier, what was that only few communities and individual organizations like NGOs used folk media for development. But if you compare the advantages of mass media and folk media, basically, if you are trying to bring changes in the rural audience where the majority of the people are located, folk media stands above the mass media because the folk media is the people's media. So you can say that it is a media of the people, by the people, and for the people. And apart from that, what happened was that still there is no importance given to the folk media forms because governments feel that it is very time consuming. You need to reach to reach a larger audience, you have to conduct some kind of plays or some kind of performances in each and every village. And so the same group might go to different villages and perform the same thing. And reaching out to a larger audience is very difficult. And hence, they still prefer using mass media. For example, you can take the best example will be the Swachh Bharat campaign, basically highly use of the mass media to reach to the audiences present on the ground. And they don't feel that folk media is that important because it is very time consuming, and the reach is also very limited. So if you are the reach is limited in the sense that you are reaching out to communities not at a same time. Whereas when it comes to mass media, everything flows and everything reaches out to the people at the particular same time. So this is the only drawback which folk media offers, because the drawback is that the reach is very limited to a particular small audience. You cannot reach a larger audience with the folk media form.